With introductions, I think that one of the things that you can always do, which is nice, is kind of give yourself a little bit of indulgence and, maybe take a little bit of a photo just for someone else. I'm going to do that very briefly by saying that one of the things that's really great about getting to introduce Suzanne is that she was an important person in the very early part of my career because she supervised my thesis. So I was really excited to get the opportunity. But we'll talk about things that are a little bit more important that Suzanne has done. She's now a professor of urban environmental planning at University of Virginia School of Architecture. She has had a long career in civic work before that, serving as the president of the Pew Partnership for Civic Change, and she was formerly the director of programs at the Academy Foundation and now serves as the board chair of the Academy Foundation. She was formerly the board chair of Piedmont Virginia Community College in Central Virginia, and she now directs at the University of Virginia Community Design Research Center, and she is the author of a really great book, Smart Communities, How Citizens and Leaders Can Build Brighter Futures. Thank you. Suzanne.
Well, as you can tell, thank you, Stuart. He's one of our rising stars. He was. We knew it back many years ago, and he really is one of those people that we brag about a lot at the University of Virginia. We say, oh, you remember Stuart. So he's a terrific addition to this region and certainly to the Federal Reserve Bank. So, Stuart, thank you so much. I think the easiest thing that I can say about the last 24 hours is you better be glad you live in Florida. I won't give you what it took, but let us just say that it got to be a challenge. And this morning at about 8 o'clock, when I was carrying my bags 2 blocks down to get in my car that I had put away so I would get away from the ice, I thought, I'm going to get there today, one way or the other, even if I have to drive myself. So I knew I was coming. I didn't even write Bob a note and say, things are a little shaky on this end after, so I didn't want to scare him worse. But anyway, thank you all for being here. It's a delight. I want to spend just a few minutes talking about how we take this idea, this summit, to the next step, at least from my own experience and some things that we have learned over the years. But let me start with 2 of those famous brothers, Wilbur and Orville Wright, to set the stage. When they completed their model of the airplane in Dayton, Ohio, it only went 7 miles per hour at the time. That was back in 1909. But the experiment of the airplane was not complete. The real test came on a hill in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, when the model had to fly. The lift of the model made an airplane out of an idea. The Wright brothers knew what all great social inventors know. Models without lift are static. Ideas alone do not change systems unless they scale barriers, overcome resistance, and create new thinking. This is why the title of this event, Advance Summit, is so important. This is about advancing not only ideas, but also the barriers that have kept us from being all we could be. So let me turn, though, to yet another famous American, Mark Twain, who once remarked that it's what you learn when you think you know it all that really matters. So a few decades ago, we thought we knew what the world would look like in this 3rd millennium, what it would take to maintain our lifestyles and our well-being, what it would take to finally solve some of those long-standing wicked problems like poverty educational achievement or underachievement, homelessness. You can fill in the blanks. Reality has set in. Our communities and our world are not only different than they thought they would be, by some accounts, they're changing daily. So what to do? What to do? A few years ago, my family and I were attending a religious service together at the most majestic times of the season. One of the most majestic times. And so, just as the chorus broke of this famous hymn, a little voice from the back of the room, back of the church, said, E-I-E-I-O. The parents' horror notwithstanding, I think that young child spoke volumes about where we are today in our community work. We sing the song we know. We sing the song we know. But I believe we're at a point in the development of our communities, and certainly in the states that we all represent, that we need not only a few verses, different verses, but perhaps a whole new song. So I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about what that song might look like in Florida and how it might support the work that you all are planning and thinking about and advancing during this 24-hour period. Now, our country is obsessed with champions. You know a little bit about champions here in the state of Florida, don't you? From the Super Bowl to the Final Four to the Little Leaguers that we used for. We're glued to find out at different points in the year who's the best, except for at least 12 months or so. In addition to winning trophies, however, championship teams almost always stand for something. Think about it. You can say they work hard, it's talent, it's teamwork, talented coach. In the case of UVA basketball, we're boring. So that's okay too. But we almost always point to one thing that really makes the difference. That one thing that I want to suggest to you tonight in our community work is about champions, not leaders. Champions, not leaders. These are people who have it as their job to set agendas that improve things, that convene and encourage others to do their best, and never give up until the job is done. As I look around this room tonight, I look first for champions and then for leaders. Now, why would I make that distinction? Sounds a lot like the same thing. Not really. We've researched and argued as a country, as communities, over the term leadership for decades. But I think we've come to a watershed in our country, in our communities, and in the state of Florida, every place in the United States, that we need a different song. Certainly, much has been done across our country, across the state, across your own communities. No one is disputing that. But what has not happened, in my view, is that we have not made the kinds of systemic changes necessary to really change our outcomes. We're still nibbling around the outfield fence when we need to be smack in the middle of the game. We have to ask ourselves, all of us, are we going to be players? Or are we going to be champions? That's the real question for us. This evening, I want to share a few stories about some community champions and what they've done. I had the pleasure last year of revising the Smart Communities book for a 10-year anniversary edition. So I got to go back and look at all those people, Stu, and see people in places to see if they've kind of panned out over 10 years. And I want to talk about a couple of those today. My definition of a smart community is one that invests right the first time, that works together, builds on its strengths, practices democracy, preserves the past to plan for the future, grows new leaders, and invents the future. And in case after case after case, those points were made realities by people who are champions. Let me talk just about three. One of the crown jewels of the Blue Ridge Mountains is Asheville. Many of you have been there. They have lived there. It is home to the creative economy. It's considered one of the mid-sized cities that's progressing and moving and growing. You have many of them here. Unfortunately, it hasn't always been so good for Asheville. In the 1920s, when the stock market crashed, the city of Asheville had more debt than Raleigh, Durham, Winston-Salem, and Greensboro combined. And so they decided as a community that they would not default on their loans. And so until 1976, 46 years, they laboriously paid on the loans that the community owed. And when they burned that loan document in 1976, they were ready to get started. They wanted something new. And the something new was to tear down 11.5 blocks of Art Deco buildings in downtown Asheville to build a suburban mall. A mall to complete the suburban mall. Okay. Well, it seems kind of like a reasonable idea. We want to fire up the troops downtown. We want to revitalize our downtown. Keep in mind that Asheville has the second most Art Deco buildings to Miami Beach. So the plan would have been a fait accompli had it not been for a group of citizens led by a local merchant, Wayne Caldwell, who owned Sluter Furniture. Now, Wayne is a PhD himself, taught at Appalachian State, and he was able to, and a writer, I bring this up because he has a couple of books, if you ever see them out. He brought together a coalition of downtown merchants, preservationists, and a whole lot of people that just said this is a bad idea. And they were pitted against sort of the establishment. And it was you can go back and look at it, it was quite an argument and a fight. But in the end, Wayne Caldwell and those folks won. What you see today in downtown Asheville is a result of this kind of friction that happened. So what am I saying? We need ways for people in communities to actually think through and deliberate on the best kind of change. Sometimes the obvious thing is not the best thing. In the case of Asheville, the rest is history. The citizens won, saved the city from a fate fraught with problems. Wayne Caldwell still lives there, would not call himself a champion. But if you get a chance to visit Asheville, and you're sitting outside at one of those sidewalk cafes, think about Wayne Caldwell and be real happy that he didn't take a vacation. The second one I want to tell you about is Tupelo, Mississippi. And we hear a lot about Tupelo. And this is really metaphoric of sports. Because what they did in Tupelo, Mississippi was they built a bench. No self-respecting coach of soccer, basketball, football, lacrosse, you fill in the blanks, would ever have just the exact number of players on the court or the field. You always have a bench. We'll hear it tonight. How many points FSU or UVA got from the bench. So the idea here is that people get tired, they get worn out. How do you have enough energy and creativity and flow in a community to have a high level of performance? The answer to that question came from a man named George McLean. George McLean came to Tupelo, Mississippi in the 30s. He was a native son, bought the newspaper, and declared that Tupelo would come back. Now, Tupelo was in the poorest state, in the poorest county in the United States, had no natural beauty and no natural assets. but George was determined. So one of his things was to get people involved. He used the power of the pen to elaborate on various issues, but if you moved to Tupelo, you got a job, a civic job. So it was an expectation that was built in. He knew three things would change Tupelo: working together, education, and civic involvement. And he dedicated his time, his money, and his editorials to those causes. He and the other community members at the time set the bar high. At one point, Tupelo, Mississippi was the leading exporter of upholstered furniture in the world. They were able to build a number of Fortune 500 companies. They had a world-class education, blue ribbon education by Harvard. This was because one man championed a community, and not just an individual, not just the city limits, but the whole area. George McClain believed in positive thinking, inclusive thinking, honest and realistic expectations, but advancing all the while. Now the third person I want to talk about is a person you would never hear about, but who changed my views on what I'm saying to you today. We did some work a number of years ago down in the Mississippi Delta, and not a group not unlike the one sitting before me. And so from that group, we chose some facilitators, or they chose some facilitators to help run a local leadership program, regional leadership program. And one of the people they selected was a woman named Mary. And I had met Mary at this event, and I didn't think Mary was quite the person I would have chosen, to be honest. She was very excited, but I just didn't feel, I didn't say it, but I just didn't feel like she was quite the one. And so we get to this event where we're training these people to be facilitators, and Mary happened to be sitting at my table. And somebody said, we started 1 o'clock. Mary, why'd you get up at 2 o'clock in the morning? And she said, oh, I had to get ready, I get my things together. And for the first time in all these years of working in communities, I realized something. No one had ever invited Mary to come to eat. She is an African-American woman that lives in a very segregated kind of community. Her sphere of influence was her church and her children's school. But she was a person brimming with ideas and enthusiasm and abilities that had gotten overlooked year after year after year. She had never been to a conference like this. So in the course of this training, my job is to teach program evaluation. And as you can imagine, people do kind of go to sleep. They sort of nod off, actually, when I teach. And so I was struggling. And Mary raised her hand and she said, I believe I can do that. And she came up and taught the rest of the course. Now, I've told that story about Mary all over the United States, including the Brookings Institution. And person after person will come up to me afterwards and say, I'm Mary. Might be a white man, Hispanic woman, a Native American man, young person. People don't even see me. So part of what we have to think about, is the champions in our communities who we don't know, we don't see, and who may not fit the characteristic in our own lives. I'll take Mary on my team any day. Now, just to kind of conclude this, the other thing that surprised me when I went back to look at these cities in this book were the ones that had actually progressed. What were they doing? In places like Austin. created by a group just like this of stakeholders, meeting time after time after time. They created their microelectronics industry. They still submit second most patents to the Mayo Clinic in the United States. Austin created Austin today as we know it. How about Pittsburgh? That's another city. They lost 100,000 jobs in one sector, steel. Pittsburgh is a go-to place. It's where people want to go. People are involved. They're creating this different kind of footprint. And then one that might surprise you from our post-industrial north, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Grand Rapids is the home of Amway, Meyer Stores, some others. No matter what you think about what I'm about to say, I hope the message will last. They have become the microbrewery capital of the United States. They have more than anybody else. They have created an atmosphere to join quality of life with economic development in a very, very interesting way. While so many Michigan cities are on the downturn, they're on the upturn in every respect. So, how do we do this? How do we become champions? First, we structure initiatives like this for the outcome we want. That's what community organizers will tell you. Decide what you want. Have a vision. We work with every sector, just like you do it. My friend Linda Hood and our partner Shelley, that's what they're thinking about. You know this. You do it every day. Secondly, we find community issues that galvanize people. People care about their children. They care about the environment. They care about education. One of the things that changed in my career was I quit worrying about whiners. I just stopped. I just can't stand it anymore. I'm interested, and I'm also not interested in why people come to the table sometimes. The idea is to find issues where you can bring people together to celebrate their own interests. I had a conversation about 3 weeks ago with the principal planner of a city in Germany, Freiburg, Germany. It's one of the most sustainable cities in the world. They have more sunny days than any place in Germany, just like you. And so I asked him, I mean, they have world-class transportation, world-class schools, world-class housing. I said, Wolf, how did you know what to do? He said, I looked at the mountain before us, and then I kept looking. He said, the job of people in communities is not just to see what's there, but to imagine what's on the other side. So 3, we develop a clear expectation and path for civic involvement. Dr. King said, we must teach people to believe in themselves. And he also said, we came on different boats, but we're in the same boat now. So being able to create this sense of commonness, it sounds so easy, and it's really hard. So, we're at an advance. What do we want champions to be able to do? The Advance Summit. We want champions in our communities and in this state who can respond to crises, certainly. But what we need more are people who can anticipate problems and opportunities and put systems in place that will prevent issues from becoming problems. What did Albert Einstein say? He said, experts solve problems, geniuses prevent them. We want to prevent them. Secondly, we have to look in and outside of our communities. You know what the STPs are, the same 10 people. We've got Marys. We've got a lot of people out there. Just a quick little story. I was assigned at my church to have a group of people bring refreshments. So I called them and I said, all these people, would you mind stopping at the store and bring some cookies, for refreshments? Nobody had time. Don't have time to bake, don't have time to go to the store. So I reported back to the person who asked me to do it. I said, I couldn't find anybody, Pat, that would come or bring their food. She said, well, what did you ask them? I said, I asked them if they would bring refreshments for after church on Sunday. And she said, well, you asked them the wrong question. And I said, well, why? She said, ask them to keep the nursery. And they'll be so thrilled that they don't have to, they'll bring anything. So we've got to think about a way to ask people to get involved so that they will be so thrilled that they don't have to. The third thing, it's implied. We need vision. We need champions who have vision and persistence. They got to see it, and they got to see it through. See it and see it through. Now, I want to close with some thoughts from someone, if you don't know of him, you should. His name was John Gardner. John Gardner was perhaps the civic leader of certainly my generation. And for you students, look it up, but not right now. Don't Google right now. John Gardner was a Republican in a Democratic administration. He was responsible for the architect with others of developing some of our social programs. He was the president of the Carnegie Foundation, on the faculty at Stanford, and wrote many books. And plus was a truth. Wonderful. If he were here tonight with us, here's what he would say to you. He wrote it in his book, Self-Renewal. He said, there's something I know about you that you may not know about yourself. You have within you more resources of energy than have ever been tapped, more talent than has ever been exploited, more strength than has ever been tested, and more to give than you have ever given. So it's time to sing a new song for the state of Florida. And that song is, We Are the Champions. Thank you very much.